The room had been prepared for a routine legal formality. Instead, one broken seal changed the emotional balance of the royal family. When Queen Elizabeth's private ledger was opened, before a tightly controlled gathering of solicitors and senior royals, Harry's history was laid bare, but not in the way he expected. His name appeared beside a series of withdrawn privileges, while one younger royal was identified as the person the late Queen had chosen to protect what remained. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry leaned forward as the lead solicitor placed the opened book between Prince William, King Charles, Princess Anne, and two legal witnesses inside Windsor. The private ledger, a handwritten record kept apart from ceremonial files and released only when Elizabeth's legal conditions were met, controlled access to a protected legacy fund containing correspondence, keepsakes, records, and money reserved for stewardship. The solicitor spoke plainly. The Queen had removed Harry from control of that fund and named Princess Charlotte as its beneficiary and guardian. Harry asked for the sentence again. He heard Charlotte's name twice, then slowly sat back as the meaning settled over him. The wording was deliberate, personal, and written in the monarch's own hand. Charles reached toward the page but stopped. The king looked at his younger son, torn between comforting him as a father and accepting his mother's judgment. William remained still, yet the prince's silence carried strain, because his daughter now stood at the center of a conflict she did not know existed. The solicitor turned the page and revealed the line that changed everything. Access without stewardship creates danger. Through the documented legal account, he explained that Elizabeth feared private family material could become leverage if entrusted to someone no longer bound by palace discretion. The expectation that intimate royal matters remain confidential. Charlotte had not simply inherited wealth. She had become the eventual guardian of a protected family archive, while William and Catherine would serve as trustees, temporary legal managers preserving it until she reached the age named in the ledger. Anne moved closer and fixed her eyes on a date beneath Harry's withdrawn status. She recognized it at once. The princess remembered a private incident at Balmoral, the royal family's Scottish residence, that had never entered the public record. Harry watched her expression change and understood that she knew why the Queen had acted. And as Harry stared at the date that had silently ended his place in the Queen's private plans, the room began to understand that Charlotte's name was not the true surprise. The hidden reason behind it was. This was never simply a contest between an uncle and his niece. Harry represented a wound the monarchy had never successfully closed, while Charlotte represented a future Queen Elizabeth believed could still be protected. One had spent years demanding to be heard beyond palace walls. The other was still a child, unaware that her name had been placed inside one of the most consequential private documents of the late monarch's life. Between them stood William, carrying both guilt and responsibility. Harry had spent his life measuring himself against being the second son. He had grown up beside William, close enough to feel the crown's pressure but never control its direction. Through every rupture, he believed his bond with the Queen would remain untouched. She had listened when others judged and comforted him. That was why the ledger cut so deeply. He had expected it to confirm their connection. Instead, it drew a boundary around it. Charlotte occupied another place. As the second child of William and Catherine, she stood between George, whose future carried constitutional responsibility, and Louis, whose position offered freedom. Elizabeth had seen in her a stabilizing presence, close enough to understand duty, yet distant enough from immediate power to protect family history without using it. The trust, a legally protected arrangement managed for another person, was more than inheritance. It was a test of character for the future. William lowered his eyes as the solicitor explained Charlotte's role. The prince knew the decision protected his daughter, but he also understood what it did to his brother. He quietly asked whether her name could remain confidential. A child, he warned, must not become the target of an adult war. Harry heard the request and turned toward Charles. His voice tightened. He reminded the king that his grandmother had promised he would always hold a place in the family's private heart, placing Charlotte where he believed he belonged. He argued, rewrote that promise after death. Charles did not answer. The silence wounded him. Anne remained composed. She had watched Elizabeth separate love from responsibility many times. Affection, she told Harry, was never the same as legal trust. Then, a folded note slipped from behind Charlotte's entry. William's name was written across it, but the instruction was clear. It could be opened only after Harry heard the full reason for his removal. Harry looked again at the Balmoral date. A tense conversation beside a closed writing desk returned with brutal clarity. But the ledger had not been altered because of years of vague disappointment. It had been changed after one specific night, one private request, and one decision Harry believed his grandmother would eventually forgive. The date beneath Harry's name led back to a rain-soaked evening at Balmoral, when the Queen received a request she considered more dangerous than anyone around her understood. There were no cameras, no official minutes, and no announcement afterward. Only Harry, Elizabeth, and a locked writing desk were involved. Yet before midnight, the monarch had summoned her private secretary, opened the ledger, and written the first line that would eventually transfer a protected legacy away from her grandson and toward Charlotte. Elizabeth had spent the evening sorting letters, diaries, and private records that held decades of family crises. Balmoral, the royal family's Scottish residence, had often been where difficult conversations unfolded beyond public attention. Harry entered her sitting room after asking that no aides remain. He believed privacy would make honesty possible. Instead, it made the stakes impossible to escape. Harry asked to use selected family correspondence in a future memoir or media project. He argued that those letters would explain his choices, prove what he had endured, and allow him to tell a fuller story. The Queen closed the drawer containing the papers. She removed her glasses, placed them beside the ledger, and asked whether every private memory now had to be judged by its public value. Her disappointment never became anger. That made it worse. Elizabeth told him that grief shared within a family should never become inherited currency. Harry heard rejection where she intended warning. He insisted that silence had protected the institution more than it had protected him, and that his life could not be understood while the palace controlled every surviving record. The monarch listened, then offered a compromise. Harry could retain private access if he signed a binding confidentiality commitment, a legal promise preventing personal correspondence from being published or commercially used. He refused. He would not surrender his future right to speak, even to preserve access to the papers he wanted most. Harry left, believing time would soften her position. Elizabeth waited until the door closed, then summoned her private secretary. She asked which younger royal had shown patience without demanding attention, and Charlotte's name was suggested. The Queen did not accept it immediately. Character, she said, must decide the choice, not affection. That night, she began a 3-year observation process and recorded every stage inside the ledger. Anne now revealed that Balmoral had only opened the fracture. Months later, another confrontation confirmed the decision, and William had been present when Harry unknowingly proved Elizabeth's deepest fear correct forever. The private request at Balmoral opened the fracture, but it was the confrontation that followed months later, between two brothers and a monarch refusing to be pressured, that made the change permanent. Harry had demanded an explanation, but he was not prepared for William to give him one. With the solicitors asked to leave, and Charles standing silently beside the fireplace, the brothers faced each other across the opened ledger. Years of resentment suddenly narrowed into a single question. Had the Queen removed Harry because the palace turned her against him, or because she had finally stopped believing his assurances? William did not raise his voice. His calmness made the answer more devastating. Harry asked everyone except the immediate family to leave the legal chamber. William closed the door himself. Anne remained because the ledger named her as an oversight trustee, a person empowered to watch the trust and stop its guardians from misusing it, while Charles stayed as both father and king. No advisor stood between them now. William explained that months after Balmoral, Harry had renewed his request during a private video call with Elizabeth. The prince had been present when his brother warned that continued refusal could one day be seen publicly as proof that the palace had something to fear. The Queen heard more than frustration. She heard pressure. Harry stepped toward the table. He accused William of using constant access to shape their grandmother's judgment and protect his future reign. Then he demanded an admission. Charlotte had been chosen because placing the archive with William's daughter strengthened his side of the family. William finally let anger enter his voice. "Look at me, Harry." He said he had known nothing about Charlotte's designation until the ledger was opened. Then came the sharper truth. Harry's refusal to believe that answer, he said, was exactly why Elizabeth had placed the legacy beyond his control. Anne opened the documented account and read the monarch's final assessment. Harry's pain was real, the Queen had written, but his judgment became unreliable whenever he felt unheard. Compassion for him remained. Confidence in his restraint did not. The ledger held another surprise. Elizabeth had first considered Anne, then Catherine, before rejecting both as long-term guardians, because each already stood inside the adult struggle. Charlotte offered something different, a generation not yet shaped by rivalry, accusation, or the need to win. Harry placed his palm beside the signature and refused to accept the document until its legal authority was proven. Charles watched him without moving. William summoned the solicitors back. Their answer would expose how completely the Queen had anticipated him. Harry believed the fight might still be about interpretation, but when the solicitors returned, they revealed that Elizabeth had built the ledger to survive precisely this kind of challenge, and had placed its power in hands he could not easily confront. Queen Elizabeth had anticipated resistance. The ledger was not merely a list of wishes, but the foundation of a carefully constructed private trust, protected by signatures, witnesses, and 3 guardians, chosen for entirely different reasons. William held responsibility for Charlotte. Catherine represented stability beyond the brothers' conflict. Anne possessed the authority to stop either side from exploiting the arrangement. Together, they formed a wall around the child's inheritance, and Harry realized that his grandmother had designed it so emotion could not overturn judgment. The lead solicitor opened the papers and explained the structure. Charlotte's inheritance sat inside a protected private family trust, a legal arrangement created to preserve assets for someone else. William and Catherine could manage the archive, protect the records, and approve conservation, but neither could sell, publish, transfer, or personally benefit from a single item. Their authority was real, yet deliberately limited. Anne held the sharper power. The princess had been named independent protector, meaning she could suspend access whenever political pressure, financial interest, or family emotion threatened the arrangement. Elizabeth had chosen her because duty had mattered more to Anne than praise. Harry understood the message. Even William could be stopped. Catherine received the explanation in a separate room. She gripped the back of a chair and said Charlotte must never carry bitterness created before she could understand it. The future queen's first instinct was not triumph, but fear. Her daughter had gained protection, yet that protection could make her the symbol of an adult conflict. Charles reacted differently. The king asked why the sovereign held no controlling authority. The solicitor answered through the trust instructions. Elizabeth had separated the arrangement from the crown, so no future monarch could rewrite it to settle a private dispute. Charles went silent. His mother had not merely bypassed him. She had prevented him from rescuing either son. Harry's restriction was then read aloud. He could view selected material, but only with Anne present, and only after signing the same confidentiality commitment he had rejected at Balmoral. His removal was not complete exile. It was conditional access, tied to accountability. Charlotte's future power went further. At the named age, she could preserve the archive privately, place portions in the royal collection, the body that cares for historic royal objects, or seal sensitive material permanently. No adult could choose for her. Then the solicitor found an appendix beneath the signatures. It listed items removed from Harry's expected inheritance, including Elizabeth's final letter to him. The trust had taken away Harry's control, but the appendix revealed something even more painful. It had also placed the Queen's final words to him behind the very promise he once refused to make. The consequences began before the meeting had officially ended. Harry's legal challenge collapsed, his access request was suspended, and the final letter from his grandmother remained sealed inside Charlotte's trust. Yet the most painful moment came not from the solicitors, but from Charles. When his son asked him to intervene, the king did not reach for the document or order another review. He lowered his eyes and admitted that overturning Elizabeth's decision would mean proving she had been right to fear royal pressure. The solicitors spoke with a finality Harry could not escape. Any attempt to contest the arrangement would require a private trust dispute, a legal challenge over how protected family assets were being controlled. That action would expose the Balmoral request, his refusal to sign the confidentiality promise, and the later conversation Elizabeth had entered into her own records. Fighting back would not hide the past. It would drag every painful detail into the open. William moved quickly. He instructed his office that Charlotte's name must not leave the room, while Catherine asked for stronger protection around their daughter's schedule. She feared ordinary appearances would become symbols of a family battle the child had never chosen. William agreed, though the decision made the divide with Harry feel even wider. Harry turned to Charles and asked for a delay. He wanted one private conversation before the trust took effect. The king remained seated, rubbing his thumb against the edge of a blank page. Then he said he had no moral right to rewrite his mother's final act. The answer was calm, but it landed like abandonment. The others eventually left. Harry stayed beside the empty chair, where Elizabeth might once have sat. He touched the closed ledger, pulled his hand away, and whispered that the family had managed to make him lose her twice. The lead solicitor returned with one last condition. Elizabeth's final letter would be released only if Harry signed the confidentiality agreement and formally accepted Charlotte's guardianship without legal challenge. Anne offered no easy comfort. The princess told him this was not punishment. It was the final chance the Queen had created for him to prove that a private message could remain private, even when it held answers the world would pay to hear. Harry left without signing. Hours later, he requested a meeting with William alone. No advisor would attend, no secretary would record it, and neither man would be able to hide behind royal procedure. For the first time, Harry's next move would not be shaped by a legal threat or public statement. It would depend on whether two brothers could speak honestly without an institution standing between them. No aides entered the room. No solicitor recorded the conversation. Harry and William sat alone, separated not by a ceremonial table, but by years of words neither could withdraw. Charlotte's name had brought them there, but she was not the cause of their conflict. She was the person Elizabeth had placed beyond it. For once, Harry did not ask how to regain control of the trust. He asked whether accepting the decision would make him appear guilty of everything written beside his name. William had agreed to meet after midnight in a smaller Windsor sitting room, far from the legal chamber and the weight of official titles. He left his phone outside. Harry did the same. That simple act became a test of privacy, because both men understood that trust had become the one thing neither could demand from the other. William spoke first. Elizabeth had not chosen Charlotte to punish Harry or reward his own household, he said. The Queen had selected someone young enough to inherit the family's history without needing it to prove a personal argument. Charlotte's role was not victory, it was protection. Harry admitted what the lawyers had never heard. Accepting the ledger felt like confessing that he had been unworthy of his grandmother's confidence. The fund no longer mattered. The archive no longer mattered. Even the humiliation surrounding Charlotte's name felt smaller than the sealed letter he could not read. Losing those final words, he said, felt like losing Elizabeth again. William lowered his defenses. The prince confessed that duty had become his armor, a way to hide anger behind rules, because speaking as a wounded brother felt too dangerous. Their grandmother's decision could not be reversed, but their relationship did not have to remain trapped inside it. Then William asked for one promise. Whatever followed, Charlotte would not be blamed, named, or dragged into competing stories. Harry answered immediately. She should never inherit the emotional war surrounding the trust. Harry took the confidentiality commitment and the formal acknowledgement of Charlotte's future guardianship. He requested no changes. His hand paused before the final stroke, but he completed it and slid the document across the table. William did not celebrate. He placed his hand over the signature and told his brother that Anne had already been informed. At sunrise, the Queen's final letter would be released under the rules she had established. For the first time that night, neither brother looked away from the other. The legal struggle ended with a signature, but the emotional verdict still waited inside Elizabeth's sealed envelope, and its words would decide whether Harry experienced the ledger as rejection or as one final demand to change. By morning, the secrecy around the ledger had cracked. The palace refused to discuss private legal documents, yet enough details had surfaced to ignite headlines across Britain. Harry's removal dominated the first reports, but Charlotte's name transformed the story into something larger, a late monarch's attempt to protect the future from the unfinished conflicts of the present. As cameras gathered outside Windsor, one striking public image captured the mood, not celebration, but silence, around a child suddenly carrying history she had never requested. Buckingham Palace issued a brief statement before noon. Private family trusts would remain confidential, it said, and no minor royal should face speculation. A private trust is a legal arrangement that protects assets for another person, and the palace's refusal to confirm or deny the ledger only deepened the storm. Broadcasters argued over whether Elizabeth's decision represented punishment, protection, or a transfer of responsibility to the next generation. Constitutional commentators stressed that Charlotte's role did not alter the line of succession, the formal order determining who may inherit the crown. Catherine acted before the debate could reach her daughter directly. She cancelled Charlotte's planned appearance and sat beside her at breakfast. The princess explained only that adults were discussing family papers and that none of it was Charlotte's fault or responsibility. Her calm words hid a harder fear. One ordinary child could now be turned into a symbol of victory over Harry. Harry watched the coverage alone. A presenter reduced the Balmoral confrontation to a headline about betrayal, while a panel questioned whether he had forced the Queen's hand. He shut off the television before they began discussing the sealed letter. Public judgment had arrived before private understanding. Outside a London station, copies of the Daily Chronicle carried a black-and-white image of Elizabeth beneath the words, "The Queen's Last Guardian, Charlotte named, Harry removed." Commuters stopped, read in silence, and photographed the page. Near Windsor's gates, a small crowd gathered without chanting. One woman placed a handwritten card among the flowers. "Let the child inherit peace, not the quarrel." By evening, broadcasters repeated that message across the country. The contrast was brutal. Charlotte received a legacy she could not yet understand, while Harry faced a national verdict before reading the one message meant only for him. While Britain argued, Anne entered a quiet room and placed Elizabeth's sealed letter before Harry. She reminded him that the agreement he had signed made its contents his alone. The world had already delivered its judgment in headlines, but Harry's true reckoning would not happen before cameras. It would come in silence, through words the Queen had written knowing he might one day be ready to understand them. Harry opened the letter expecting a final accusation. Instead, he found a boundary wrapped in love. Elizabeth did not deny his pain, erase his place in the family, or pretend that the monarchy had never failed him, but she made one conviction unmistakable. Suffering did not grant ownership over every person's private truth. Charlotte had been named because the future required a guardian without an argument to win. Harry had been removed because he still confused being heard with being entitled to reveal everything. Anne sat across from him without speaking as he broke the seal. The message explained that the ledger, a record of instructions, had been created to protect family history from two dangers: institutional concealment and personal exploitation. Elizabeth feared the palace might bury truths, but she also feared those truths could become weapons for attention, revenge, or profit. Harry read on. The Queen had not chosen Charlotte as his replacement. She had chosen her as a safeguard between generations, someone young enough to inherit the archive without inheriting the struggle. Her authority would carry a duty, deciding what should enter public history and what must remain within the family. Harry reached the final page and stopped. Elizabeth wrote that she had never doubted his love. She had doubted the choices he made when love became tangled with anger. He pressed the letter against the table and wept without hiding it from Anne. Anne spoke. Being denied control, she told him, was not the same as being denied belonging. Harry understood then that the ledger had not erased his bond with his grandmother. It had placed a condition around it. Privacy had to be respected before trust could return. Harry issued a written statement accepting the administration of the private trust, a legal arrangement protecting assets for another person, and insisting that Charlotte must never be dragged into public hostility. He revealed nothing from the letter, blamed neither William nor Charles, and abandoned every challenge. William acknowledged the decision privately. Charles embraced his younger son after the statement was released. The old wounds remained, but restraint had replaced disclosure. Charlotte inherited the protected legacy without inheriting the feud. Harry lost authority over the archive, yet regained trust by honoring Elizabeth's final condition. The ledger closed exactly as Elizabeth intended. With Charlotte entrusted to protect the family's history, Harry forced to confront the cost of exposing it, and the monarchy reminded that its most valuable inheritance was never wealth or status, but the wisdom to know what must be preserved in silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.